So I was a lot younger, or at least a looked younger then. I think I've still got that tie. But it was a drip, drip flood for the global economy. Delighted to have Jim Boulden with me. You heard him covering the first moments of crisis as CNN's business correspondent. Great to have you with us.
Nice to see you again, Richard.
Look, Jim, we know how this happened.
Yeah.
It was exotic financial instruments that were too clever by half, that were leveraged and got into and infected banks. But there was underlying trends as well, weren't there? For example, did you realise then this was going to be as bad?
No, I think what we didn't realize is that European banks had decided to get into the game as well. And so when people, we already saw house prices falling in the U.S. There were problems with subprime mortgages, as they were called. But most of us thought, okay, that's a U.S. story. There are other things going on. We didn't know what was going to come down the road. We're only 10 years ago this week was that press release, as you said. But 1 month later, we had what was the Northern Rock crisis, where a little bank here in the U.K., just a few yards away from here, we started to see customers queuing up to get their money out.
Which was the first bank run, if I remember, in something like a couple of centuries.
Yeah, it was unprecedented, and it was insured, and yet people still, we should have listened to them more, Richard, because people said, I don't care what you're telling me, I got to get my money out. And that, to me, in September of 2007, a year before Lehman Brothers, was really what triggered it.
Yeah, but here's the chain reaction. Northern Rock happened because BNP Paribas happened, because all these, there was a sudden lack of confidence and trust.
And credit freeze.
Nobody was prepared to lend to anybody else.
Exactly.
And Northern Rock relied on it.
Yeah, and they relied on it too much because they were trying to expand. Everybody thought this is a game that we can't lose. We've got to get in. Icelandic banks, Irish banks, UK banks, all of those collapses were yet to come.
Once Lehman Brothers went, then, of course, it mushrooms. The credit crunch continues, and now we're going from a banking crisis to an economic crisis.
Yes, and remember, we haven't had the debt crisis yet in the European Eurozone.
But that followed on.
Yeah, so we had the Great Recession, then we had Icelandic banks collapse, we had the Irish government collapse and their banks collapse, and then we had the whole thing about European debt. And, you know, the Greek crisis, which we have still talking about to this day, hadn't even surfaced. We weren't even talking about that yet 10 years ago.
I mean, we could arguably say, should we have foreseen it? The question, of course, how much damage did this crisis do?
It's extraordinary, I think, when we think back of all the issues. We talk about how unemployment in places like Spain.
25%.
And we saw it in Greece. We can say that Greece was not a recession, but a depression. And they're still in that to this day. And you talk about the U.S., so many people losing their homes. You talk about, now, I know that doesn't sound right today, but we are talking about that happening. And an entire class of people absolutely got wiped out.
Jim, you and I sat in this room covering this.
Yeah.
Some days the Dow fell 1,000 points. Some days it went up 500 points. Did you ever fear that it was going to get away from the regulators or the central banks and they would lose control? I
sat in this very room on Sunday nights having to do live shots because we were waiting for a message from the ECB or someone to say something before the Asia markets opened. Every Friday for several months, every Saturday, every Sunday, the bankers were getting together and trying to make sure when markets reopened on Monday that they had said something to try to get it from going out of control. And a lot of people I talked to absolutely thought the euro was going to collapse after all of this. And of course it didn't.
Great to have you, sir. Really good to have you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.